In today's video, I'm going to be using some paper clips to make some beads that you can use in jewelry and other projects. So to start with, I'm going to show you how I made these simple rolled coil beads. And I also have another little style that I made that I'll show you. It's a little variation, but there's a little extra coil detail on it. And then lastly, I'll talk about some different ways and simplest ways to color and seal the beads. So this is a pretty simple process. You only need your paper clips, and these are just a standard size. You're going to need some round-tipped jewelry pliers and a pair of needle nose pliers. And to start with, to make this coiled bead, you want to open up your first paper clip. You don't have to get it completely flat for this particular bead, but you do want to have it kind of opened up and easy to roll. So I'm just going to grab one end with my round tip jewelry pliers right about in the center of the barrel, and I'm going to make my first little coil shape. And then you can continue rolling at any width or diameter that you want to. I've been rolling mine kind of down at the bottom, so they have a fairly big hole and they are a little bit larger when they're finished, but you can roll closer to the tip if you'd rather do that. And I'm rolling down toward the barrel, so as my coils move up, I'm kind of can keep the coil the same diameter because I'm rolling toward the bottom of the barrel here. And you do have to grip this pretty tight because you don't want your pliers pretty tight because you don't want the coil to spin as you're trying to finish off the end here. Now when you get to the end, it's pretty difficult to push this last bit with your fingers. So I like to use my needle nose pliers, and you're going to want to grip your round pliers really tightly so that your coil doesn't spin, and then you're just going to push the end piece around the barrel again. And then you can kind of tighten it up with your pliers just to tuck that end in as well as you can. You don't want it sticking out. And you can pinch the coil just to tighten everything up to make the coil. And you've got your first finished little coil bead. So to make this second style, you're going to do a similar procedure, but you do want to get the paper clip a little flatter, so you can use either pair of your pliers to straighten out your wire a little bit better. And then I'm going to take one end of the wire and I'm going to grab it right at the tip of my round tipped pliers so that my initial coil is very small. And I'm just going to roll it all the way around till I meet the wire again. And then what I want to do for this one is I want to wrap the coil around the outside of this first little coil. Rather than making it alongside this coil, I want to wrap it sort of flat and along the outside edge of the coil here. And if you need to, you can use your pliers to flatten it back out. And once you get past a certain point, you're probably going to want to use your needle nose pliers. And then you're just going to grip your coil nice and tight and slowly work that wire around. And I like to go just past, you can see where the end of the wire is right here. I like to go around twice and then past that about another halfway. And then I'm going to go back to the other end, and I'm just going to coil it the same way I did the first bead. So I'm going to start my coil and then slide down toward the fatter end of the barrel and do a side-by-side coil all the way around until I get down to my flat coil. And once I've gotten it coiled as far as I can, I want to turn my flat coil so that it's laying over my coil that's on the barrel. And then you can either continue twisting your coil with your fingers. When you get to the end, you're probably going to want to use your needle nose pliers again. So what I'm trying to do is just push my coil, my flat coil, down along my coils that are making the hole for the bead. And when you're done, you should have a little flat coil on top of your rings of coil. Before I show you how I colored the beads, I did want to just show you this real quick. I did try to make some beads from the colored paper clips that you can purchase, and I got kind of mixed results. So this pink version turned out okay, but what I found is that most of the time I was getting this plastic coating to kind of pull off. So I don't think it's the best way to make colored beads, but you could try it if you have some of these pre-colored rubber coated paper clips. The other thing I wanted to show you is that you can cut your paper clips in half and do smaller beads. These beads, these little red beads, were rolled around the tighter end of my round tip jewelry pliers. So this was a red paper clip that I cut in half, and then I rolled them closer to the tip of my round tipped pliers, and so you do get quite a bit smaller bead when you do that. So that's just another variation that you can try. So to color these beads, I used a couple of different materials. Most of them I used alcohol inks on, but these little more turquoise colored beads are actually colored with some acrylic paint. And whether you use the alcohol ink or the acrylic paint, you can use the exact same system. You just need a container to shake the beads around in, and if you I use my messy containers, and I don't worry if I get a little color bleed from other colors that I've had in there. If you want to be extra careful, you can use a clean container, but I don't mind if some of the colors kind of mix and bleed together. So I'm just going to take 4 of my beads and drop them into my container, and then I have some green alcohol ink. So I'm just going to take my alcohol ink and put a few drops on each little coil, and then I'm just going to shake my container around and get the beads completely covered. And once you're satisfied with the color, you can just let them dry on a piece of parchment paper or something that's not porous, that they won't stick to. If you're using acrylic paint, you probably do want a nice clean container so that your colors don't mix. And again, I'm just going to do 4 at a time here because I'm kind of experimenting with the different colors. And I thought this metallic gold might be a fun one to try. I didn't have to water down my last paint color, so I don't anticipate needing to water this down. But if your paint is a little too thick, you can certainly add a little bit of water. I'm just going to drop a little bit of paint in my container here, and then shake my beads through the paint. And once you're satisfied with the coverage, you can dump those out on your parchment paper to dry as well. If you saw my last video, you know I made some little beads out of extra sewing thread, and a lot of you asked about the durability and finishing them, and a lot of you had great ideas, so thank you for sharing that. But I did want to mention that this technique for sealing the paperclip beads would also work for the thread beads that I made in my last video. This is Duraclear gloss varnish, and it's one of my favorite varnishes to use. You can get it in a lot of different finishes. I tend to like the glossy stuff. I don't know why, but I've also used the satin, and I think they have matte as well. So to seal these, I think you probably want to do them by color. I'm going to see if the color bleeds. This is my gold paint. So I've just got a couple of I've got my beads in this little container, and I'm just going to put a few drops of the varnish in there. And I don't expect the paint to bleed, so that's one nice thing. I've got a little bit too much in there, so because of that I am going to drop my pink. No, they're not dry yet. You really only want enough to cover the beads, and I've got a little too much in there, so I'm going to let these, they'll still dry, but I just have a little more sealer than I actually need. These other two are alcohol inks. I used some orange alcohol ink and some green alcohol ink, and the varnish is probably going to make them bleed a little bit, so you'll see a little bit of the color coming off in the sealer, but I think I have plenty of sealer in there, so I'm not going to add any more. I'm actually not seeing any color bleed, so maybe the last ones I didn't quite let the alcohol ink dry completely, so that's good. I can go ahead and do my next color. If you do have some bleeding into your clear finish, you can certainly just wash out your container and start with fresh sealer. So I'm going to try to put a little bit less in here. I'm just putting a couple of drops. And I'll let those dry, and if you get extra sealer on them, and even if you probably want to move them around on your parchment paper, you know, in about 5 minutes, you want to just roll them around and let that finish kind of dry more evenly. And I guess I'll go ahead and do these. I don't think the paint's quite dry, so we might lose a little color here, but all right, so I'm just going to let those dry, and I'll have some finished beads. So let me know if you plan to make any of these beads and what kind of projects you plan to make with them. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed today's content. Also, if you haven't already, be sure to click the subscribe button to join my YouTube community, and you can check the description for a place to sign up to receive the Upcycled Design Lab newsletter, as well as finding some extra resources. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.